Hello.
We don't want to be recording right now, do we?
Do you want me to hit pause? Just remind me later.
I know. Katie and I were just chatting that we may adjust a little bit because of the size, and also knowing some of the people on the call, we may have maybe a little basic for you all, but I think we're going to mix things up a little bit. So first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming. Most of you know me except for Justin. Justin, it's lovely to meet you. I'm Kimberly Robson. I work and live in Washington, D.C., but I am from Utah, and I actually serve on the Walker Institute's board. Graduate of Weber State, former RA. And so I'm really excited to be able to be here tonight with my colleague. Katie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Katie Seppi, and I am from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I actually started working with Save the Children Action Network in South Carolina as a mobilization manager, so I was doing some on-the-ground organizing there, and recently moved back to Salt Lake, so I'm excited to be here.
So you have two Utahns on the phone doing the training for you tonight. One there and one not. We were very disappointed that we could not be in person. That is how the world goes right now. So thank you for joining us tonight. So tonight we really want to focus on an Advocacy 101 training. So Katie, do you want to put up the PowerPoint? So as many of you probably know, advocates play a critical role in influencing our elected officials. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. So this is a group of advocates who partner with Save the Children Action Network, which we'll tell you a little bit about in Washington, D.C. In the good old days when we could come in person and lobby Congress. These same advocates though also lobby at their state legislatures. So we want to talk and help you understand how you can use your voice on the issues that you care about. So tonight, here is the kind of our agenda for the evening that we'd like to go through with you. Just introduce you to Save the Children and Save the Children Action Network. That's who Katie and I work for. Talk about becoming an advocate. What does that mean? What to say, who to contact, how to contact them, building support, and then wrapping it all together with some examples of effective campaigns that Save the Children Action Network has run with our advocates across the country. So to get started, who is Save the Children? Save the Children in the US is nearly a 100-year-old organization. Globally, it is over 100 years old, and it invests in children across the world. Gives you some numbers here in terms of we work in 120 countries, including the US. One of the things that I was unaware of when I started working for Save the Children Action Network is that Save the Children is working in the US in rural communities. They're working in some of the most impoverished areas in our country on behalf and with children. So the organization broadly reaches over 185 million children. And it's really an amazing opportunity to give children a healthy start and the opportunity to learn. Save the Children Action Network, who Katie and I work for, we are not quite so old. We will be having our 8th birthday this year. So I used to joke when we first were founded that we were in a home visiting program, and then we moved to a pre-K program, then kindergarten. Well, now we're going to be 8. So whatever grade that is, 3rd grade, I think, 4th grade, I lose track. But we are the advocacy and political arm of Save the Children. And we're founded in 2014 to give children a stronger voice in the political system. The founder of Save the Children Action Network wanted to build political power around the issues of kids. He'd run the US Programs Division for years and understood that in order to make systemic change for kids, you had to have the political power as well. So we act as the voice for kids. So what do we do? One of our issue areas we work on? Our overall goal here, as you see, is to give every child a strong start in life. And together with our network of supporters, we work on these 4 critical issues. Working on expanding early childhood education in the US. That also includes child care, which you've heard a lot about during the pandemic. And I know some of you on this call have dealt with during the pandemic. We work on preventing hunger in the US. And again, this also became a very prevalent issue during the pandemic as well. We work also on treating children seeking safety in the US with passion. You've probably heard of the child separation and the migrants coming to the US border. We focus on children and making sure that they have the safety and are treated with compassion. We also work to educate and protect kids around the world in partnership with our global colleagues, whether that's on mental health awareness, safe schools to make sure, and common sense to make sure that kids can go to school safely, even in war zones. And so we work to educate and protect kids around the world. So Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, and I'm actually going to change my screen share because I didn't like that I couldn't see anybody. So let me just change the view so that we can still see each other because it's such a small group. I don't want to feel like I'm talking to myself. So hang on one second. Okay, this should be a little bit better here. All right, so. Oh, I still can't see anyone. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, I can see you. I like that view
Okay.
better because I can see everybody, but I see your screen too.
All right, well, I guess that's good enough. I can't see anyone, but that's okay. All right, well, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what becoming an advocate means. So the reason that I have been with SCAN for as long as I have, for 7 years now, and what I just love so much about it is seeing people who have such passion about an issue and then helping them kind of hone their advocacy skills and get them comfortable with using these different tactics that we can use to influence elected officials so that they can take their voice, their passion, and actually bring it to the people who are making decisions about the issues that they care about. And I have found in the time that I've been with SCAN that I would say most of our advocates, not all, but a lot of them have a lot of issue expertise. They have a lot of passion, but not a lot of advocacy skills. And so seeing that transformation in them and how excited they get when they are able to talk to their elected officials and communicate that passion has been just so inspiring for me to see. And we have some volunteers who have worked with us for 6 years now, who have been with us that entire time and who have just really become experts and are leading meetings on Capitol Hill. And it is just so cool to see people getting that connecting piece that they need of being able to develop those skills. And so that's what keeps me here. That's what I'm excited about. And we're going to be talking tonight about some of those basic skills that you can take in order to be an advocate for the issues that you're passionate about. So I thought before we got into actually how to advocate, it's really important to know, what are you going to say? It's the first step in your prep. So I'm sure all of you have heard the term elevator pitch. You want to keep, whenever you're talking to an elected official, you want to keep it short. You want to make it personal. You really want to show why you care about it. They're up there reading policy briefs and reading the bills, reading the policy documents. What they might be missing is that piece about how it's actually impacting a family or you personally. And so bringing that personal story can be a really powerful way to bring that heart and the personal side of the issue. And then the next piece is the urgency. Why should they care about this right now? We all know that elected officials are getting probably hundreds, if not thousands of different proposals, talking to a million different people. Why should they care about this issue in particular? And then you want to know what you're going to ask them to do. So just talking passionately about the issue is great, and you may even inspire them to want to take action. But if you don't give them a really simple step of here's what we're asking you to do, then it may not end up creating the change that you want to see. So you also want to have an ask, something like, please vote yes on this bill. Please read this policy brief. something that is tangible that they can do. So I have just a quick video here that I'm going to play, and it is about how to create your elevator pitch. So let's see, that didn't work. Let me see how to play this. Oh yeah, there we go. Took a minute to get it embedded here.
In 2 minutes, you have the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of kids and mothers across the globe. Save the Children Action Network is the political voice for kids. And as an advocate of SCAN, you're helping make sure that every child has access to high-quality early learning and that no mother or child across the globe dies from a preventable death. Your elevator pitch is a short, concise statement connecting your listener to your message. Ready? Let's go. Legislators are busy, so be quick. And sharing why you care is easy. Just take a personal experience and connect it to your message, and then back it up with some facts. Want to give it a shot?
My child went to preschool and did an excellent job. I want all kids to have the same opportunities.
That's not bad, but you didn't include any facts.
My child excelled when she went to preschool, but every kid deserves the same chance she has. A child's brain is mostly developed by age 5, yet 2 out of 5 American kids never go to preschool, and many may never catch up.
To get comfortable with your message, write down your script. Be brief, just a few details, and then rehearse, rehearse, rehearse.
Around the globe, proven interventions like immunization and clean medical tools could end preventable mother and child deaths by 2030.
Then, to make an ask, know what you want. Rehearse your specific request. Then be direct, polite, and make eye contact.
I'd like to ask you to become an advocate for kids and to co-sponsor the bipartisan Reach Every Mother and Child Act.
Your listener can make a difference. So be natural, be an advocate, and be ready for that elevator.
All right, so hopefully with that example, you saw how easy the messaging can be. I think sometimes we feel like it can feel really nerve-wracking to talk to elected officials because we may not know all the policy ins and outs or be experts in the issue that we're talking about. And I think what you saw is that you don't have to be in order to be effective. So they have other people who can give them the deep policy dive. And we were thinking about giving you guys a few minutes to craft an elevator pitch and then to have you break out in pairs and practice talking about something that's important to you. And so it is a smaller group than we expected. So I don't know, Kimberly, if we still want to do that or if we want to just have people do some examples in the group.
I think people could take a couple minutes to jot something down, and maybe 1 or 2 of you would be willing to share with the group, just as an example. I mean, I think some of you are probably very well versed in elevator pitches, and others this might be the first time you're hearing about an elevator pitch. So that means think about an issue that you care about and an audience you would want to reach. Again, this is very short. We could pull back up the slide that gives you kind of the little bullet points that you need to think about. And the ask is critical because oftentimes we forget that. But telling about why you care about an issue, what it means to you, why it's urgent, and then if you don't make that ask, even if the ask doesn't have to necessarily be about a policy change, it could be about attending an event, it could be about, I know we have a fundraiser, it could be about giving money to someone, making sure that you include that ask at the end. Otherwise, you miss that opportunity to influence that individual. So maybe just take a couple minutes and people can think about it, write something down, and then hopefully maybe one person would be willing to share with our group tonight as an example.
All right, so if anyone is feeling like they would be willing to share theirs, that would be great to hear an example. If not, we can move on to the next section, but does anyone feel like sharing?
Yeah, I can. I'm happy to.
All right.
It's a little bit, yeah. I mean, it's kind of my day job too. So,
good.
I do
Do
this
that.
like you guys. So one area that we've been working on a lot is getting funding for our higher education, our David O. McKay Education Building, for renovations. It's 50 years old. It's pretty dilapidated. It really needs updated in order to keep up with the demand for us churning out teachers that, you know, support our students. So, I mean, it truly is urgent. And, you know, through the remodel, we can churn out more teachers, because there is still a shortage. We often think right now there's a healthcare shortage, but guess what? There's also a teacher shortage. So we need to continue to invest in that aspect. So the ask would be, you know, to support our request for appropriation in the state legislature. We're asking for $27 million. And we know that with that money, we'll use it responsibly. We're not doing a totally new build. We're renovating an old building, which saves us tons of money. And we'll put it to good use. You know, we'll graduate more teachers that stay in Utah. And, you know, there was a recent study that came out that said that Weber State teachers are less likely to quit in difficult times than any other university in Utah. So this is a big deal. We can help battle the teacher shortage. Just ask for your investment.
I think
Yep, you sounded like a pro.
Thanks.
Yeah, I feel ready. That was great. Thank you,
You
for
can cut
giving
me a check anytime. No.
All right, well, Kimberly.
That.
Oh, yeah.
Leah.
I'm so sorry, Justin. Then I'm not gonna. You can totally go next. But like, so Devin, like, this is his day job. So he had a very specific, like, $27 million appropriation. I feel like most normal humans, not that Devin's not a normal human, but like most of us out in the wild, right? Like, you know, my ask was like, please support our teachers by increasing pay, or like, you know what I mean? Like, please support our students by not increasing their tuition. But those are real general. So my question kind of is, do you have to know a price tag the way Devin would know as someone working, you know what I mean? Like working for the university when you're making your ask, or can you be more vague when you're just out in the world? Like if you're just one of us. So if that makes sense. So.
I mean, Katie, I can jump in. I think you can be vague. I think as long as you're making the ask. I mean, sometimes you're going to have a very specific ask. A lot of the work that we do, we're asking people, you know, whether it's a state legislature or Congress, to support a piece of legislation or a specific budget. So there is a very specific ask for us. But our advocates also use their elevator pitches to ask people to join the organization, to come to an event. So it can be for other things if you don't have a specific budget ask or legislative ask.
And I would just also add that if you are an individual who's passionate about something, but you're not really someone who wants to sit and track legislation, which, you know, most people don't. So another thing you can do is if it's an issue that someone else is working on, like there's an organization like SCAN that's doing that lift for you in terms of like following the legislation and letting you know what asks are coming up and when you should loop into it. That's a really good way to kind of take some of that lift off of yourself to have to figure out what to ask for and when, if there's an organization that's doing advocacy around the issue that you care about.
Yeah. Justin, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so question about the asks as well. Is there like any guidelines of how big an ask should be, or like, obviously you want to keep them realistic and stuff that they can do and like are actionable, but in terms of like, so I mean, to me, when I hear $27 million support for a new building, like that might be common to hear, but when you're building these asks, are there guidelines of like, try to stay within something that can be done in a certain time frame?
I think it's about the audience and who you're asking and what the context is. So for Devin to be asking for $27 billion is not a big deal for him, because it's what the appropriations to what they need. We've been working on a piece of legislation. We were asking for $50 billion for something. So I think it really varies. I will say, I think it is important to be pragmatic and understand where the opportunities are, because if you ask for too much, then they're gonna think you're unrealistic. But you also don't want to ask for too little, because you might miss an opportunity. I would love to ask people for world peace, but we know that's not going to happen. But what are the steps in between to be able to get to there that I could make an ask of someone to help move that forward?
Yeah,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just along those lines, there's a legislator up here in Utah that always says, what is it? I don't want to mess it up. He says, pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. So meaning you don't want to reach too far, you just want to be right in that happy medium, like you were saying. Anyway, sorry. I just like that expression.
Yeah, and I think we'll be getting into this in the next section, but one thing to keep in mind too is who your audience is. So if you can look up a little bit about your elected official before you go talk to them, so that you kind of get a feel for what issues do they care about, have they said anything on this in the past. It may be that if you're trying to move somebody who is not even close to being able to ready for that like financial ask, maybe it's just to get them to read something about the issue or to talk to you a little bit more so that you can share your experience with the issue. So the ask can come in a lot of forms. It's not always financial.
Yeah. The ask could be for a meeting to talk more about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Devin, for sharing and opening up the discussion there. We're going to move on now to talk about, so now you have an elevator pitch. You know what needs to be contained in that. And we just started talking about, well, then who are you contacting? Who are you having the conversation with? So as everybody here on the call knows, there are various levels of government. We have the federal, state, county, township, city, and we also have our judiciary and our executive branches. There's lots of different opportunities in terms of engagement. And the federal government, state government have a similar process and similar systems in terms of structure. And local governments, follow suit, a little more accessible at times. I will say when I was at Weber State, I interned at the Ogden City Council, and then I interned in Washington, D.C. Very different experiences, very different access points for constituents. I skipped the state piece, which I'm sure I really would have enjoyed. And I later worked with state legislature in my job. But there is different access points in terms of being able to reach different levels of government. So before you start advocating, one of the first things you want to do is to figure out who in government can help you access what you're asking for. So doing your research first. If it is about your garbage delivery system, you're not going to go to the federal government to ask for that. You're going to go to your county and township. If it's about Weber State renovating the David O. McKay Education Building, you're going to go to your state government. And if it's about changing access to childcare and providing, nationwide expansive, services around childcare, as we are doing, you would go to the federal government. So you need to think through who is it you're trying to reach and who can give you what you want. So what does that look like? How can you do that research to determine who to contact? One of the things is to stay informed. You can read the local and national newspapers, read your Weber State newspaper, watch the news, listen to the radio. Radio still exists out there. There's great stuff on the radio. Listen to a podcast. Google your issue. We all Google, I think, every single day, at least once, probably multiple times, or ask Siri for help on something. And as Katie mentioned earlier, you can also find an advocacy organization working on that issue who can help guide you and give you an understanding of what the strategy, who are they working on to be able to make change on the issue you care about. When I was at Weber State, I got introduced to Amnesty International. And I worked with them and I learned so much from them about issues I knew nothing about before. But being on campus with them, learning from them, gave me an opportunity to know how to put my interests into action. But once you know which level of government, how do you find your elected officials? There's lots of different ways to do this. Again, as we've got down here, Googling, well, you can goes a long way nowadays. That used to not exist. But there's some examples on here, ballotopedia.org, who represents me. They will list everyone who represents you at the federal and state levels. Again, there's always Google to find a little bit more, and if it's not listing what you want. And as you do that, you can also learn about what issues they care about. What are the issues that your elected officials, once you know who they are, then you can go to their pages to learn about what are they talking about, what are their stories. And one of the best ways we talk about sharing our story, but as you work to approach an elected official, we've often find their story. See if if they have a personal story related to that issue, to be able to engage with them and have that conversation. So again, we thought about breaking out into groups, but we're a small group, so we're going to all stay together. And just curious to hear from you all, what's an issue you're passionate about? And do you know what level of government has the power to make the change you'd like to see? And if you don't know, start Googling really quick.
Well, I'll say I think we're all passionate about higher education, right? Hopefully that are on this. And like with many things, I mean, it's primarily with our state legislature, but there's a lot of influence from the federal government as well. So.
Yes, I believe the Build Back Better bill had some higher ed work in there too. I think it had everything in there, but it had higher ed too. Anybody else?
I do want to take a minute and just point out we have Representative Rosemary Lesser with us. She represents the geographic area that Weber State lies in. So we appreciate her being with us and all her support. She's been incredibly helpful throughout this session. And yeah, just welcome, Representative Lesser. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. And I'll say, Representative Lesser, it's always lovely to have elected officials on these trainings, because sometimes you are the best storyteller in telling us how to reach you with our stories and how we can help provide the information you need to make the decisions at the legislature that you need to make. So if you have stories along the way that you want to share, please feel free to jump in and share them, because we do find, as we've done this all around the country, that hearing from that perspective is also helpful for advocates to know how to approach their legislators, that they're normal people, they're not scary, and they're doing the work of the people. And so that you are approachable. So feel free to jump in anytime you have anything to add.
Great. Well, I thank you for saying that. And I hope that people feel that their legislators are approachable. In Utah, we have a really remarkably complete website for accessing legislators. Very straightforward as far as, a section, what's my address, who is my legislator, and as far as emails and text, we all carry a phone and people call us up regularly. Back to the thing about appropriations, I just wanted to, we are just in the midst of the appropriations cycle right now. And the thing about how much to ask for is that the state, in our request for appropriations, we always need to have basically a complex budget for what is the program that you wanted to have fund. So for, if you want state support, the state is certainly willing to consider it, but you need to be able to write down exactly how much you're going to spend and what you're going to use it for. And then the thing that is a little tricky is that generally requests for one-time funds or maybe funds that could be divided over 2 years from a budgetary perspective, are a little bit easier to make a successful claim, because our legislature is unwilling to do ongoing commitments for large sums of money, because this is a state where they are very careful stewards of their money. And so for projects that involve, in the infrastructure world, we call them shovel ready. But if you can at least get something off the ground that 1 or 2 year ask with a, reasonable sum of money is helpful. The other thing that also aids in the proposals, especially if it's a bigger one, is if you bring a number of different entities in who are willing to commit to the process. So for instance, the Marshall White Center, for example, the bid from Ogden City to the state will be more palatable if the state hears that there's philanthropic money, there is money from a school district, that there is money from the city, that there is money from the county, that various funding sources are cobbled together, and then the state kind of tops it off. So those types of initiatives, having more than one entity involved in the funding is more helpful. So those are just my views from being there and sitting on many appropriations requests over the course of the last 2 weeks.
Great, thank you so much. And I feel like, Rosemary, you brought up a very important piece that we'd be remiss for not bringing up, and talking about bringing on different people with different budgetary aspects. You can also think about when you are wanting to advocate on an issue, is to think about all the different audiences that are impacted by the issue and building a coalition around that issue. So if, whatever the issue may be, it probably impacts more than one group of people. Bringing that group together with a variety of viewpoints and stories around that issue, may not be an appropriations point, but be able to have the different voices so you have a stronger coalition behind you. Just as if you were going for an appropriation ask, to have multiple resources to present at the table could also help you. So building that coalition, whether it's about money or people, is really important when you're advocating on an issue that you care about to make change. So Katie, I think I'm turning it back to you now.
Yes. So this next session is actually looking at a few skills that you can use to contact your elected officials. And before I did this, I just wanted to get maybe a little bit of a feel for the group of if you have ever talked to your elected officials before. I know we have an elected official, we have someone who does this very regularly, but I would love to hear from anyone else on the call about where you feel like your level of advocacy is, like if you have had contact with your elected officials, or if you're more of a newbie that's here to learn some basic skills.
So I would just share, I've never officially talked to them advocating for something. So I've had conversations with elected officials, but I had never asked anyone for anything. So I guess I'm a newbie, but it's not like I'm afraid to talk to Rosemary. Does that make sense?
And she's great at charming elected officials. I'll say that too.
So then I guess I would say that I am the newest newbie, haven't talked to elected officials. So I'm in social work, so MSW. And so all of my kind of policy advocacy has been at organizational levels. Mm-hmm. So brand new newbie.
Awesome. So my background is also, I have a master's in social work, and I did not know anything about politics or advocacy. My family, Kimberly's heard this, but was just totally apolitical growing up. My parents didn't vote. They didn't watch the State of the Union address. They didn't do anything. And so it was a real steep learning curve for me. And I got interested in it as I was doing my social work degree, because I realized how many issues clients were dealing with that really it was a policy barrier, like a larger barrier that needed to be removed in order for them to have what they needed. And so I'm glad that you're here, because I think social workers, and actually a lot of professionals, like my husband was a teacher, healthcare workers, there's so many professions where having these basic advocacy skills so that you have someone from your field represented in the conversations that are going to impact you and your clients is huge. So I'm glad that you're here. And if I can learn how to do this, you can too, because I started from absolutely zero. So, all right, well, I'm going to share my screen again and go through a couple of skills here. So the first one, this is such a great tool, I think, to just kind of view. I hope it's big enough that you guys can see this, but this chart is from results from a 2016 Congressional Management Foundation study. So it's basically this organization that interviewed staff that work for members of Congress and asked, of these different ways that constituents can contact you, which of them do you feel has some influence over the decision that you make? And so you can see that in-person issue visits from constituents was the top way to contact an elected official. Well, this is specifically members of Congress that got them like thinking about an issue. And so you can see here that, 97% said it at least had some influence. And then that's the gray bar. And then the red is them saying that had a lot of positive influence. So right under that was contact from a constituent's reps. Underneath that was individualized postal letters. So this is a tactic we use a lot at SCAN, where we'll have our advocates fill out postcards and then they'll have their friends fill out postcards. And I think I just talked to our South Carolina mobilization manager, and she had just from South Carolina like 400 or 500 postcards ready to go out on an issue that we're working on just from South Carolina. So getting those postal letters or postcards. Postal letters are better because if you're sending it to Congress, they have to go through a pretty long process of mail security if you do an actual letter, but a postcard can get through easier since there's nothing inside of it. But email messages, we're here at 88%, phone calls 86%, comments during a telephone town hall was 85%. A visit from a lobbyist is actually lower than any of these, which I think just emphasizes the point that they do want to hear from constituents and that does make a difference for them. And then it kind of goes, down a little bit, but still like 75% if they see a news editorial endorsement of an issue. Faxes, I don't know if anyone uses faxes anymore, but apparently that was still big for them. So yeah, I think this just kind of shows some different tactics you can use, and that here is, members of Congress, their staff people saying, yes, these are effective tools. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different simple and effective ways that you can influence your elected officials that are newbie level. Anyone can do these. These are the initial skills that we teach our advocates to do as they start getting interested in building their skills and reaching out to elected officials. So the first,
Katie,
oh yeah.
Katie, you want to just tell people like what this picture is of and what the advocate is doing? I think just the kind of the backstory on that.
Yeah, for sure. So we, in both 2015 and then again, this last presidential cycle, we did what's called bird dogging, which is we have our advocates go to candidate events, and the goal for them is to get a question in about our issues and to get candidates on the record on our issues. And so this was one of our advocates. I believe this is from, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
So we it's right on the photo there. But yeah, so a South Carolina volunteer who went to one of Biden's campaign rallies and was able to talk to him after and deliver this pledge. So we had these made up in advance to deliver to the candidates, but this was such a successful way for us to get in front of candidates, and we have done it at all levels of government. So this is obviously our presidential push, but we also have done it for with other elected officials as well as our campaigning and out at town halls. And so this has been, a really fun way to engage people. I more than once in 2015 in South Carolina dressed up in our mascot costume and went to events, which was a giant hand called Palmer with our High Five for Kids. So it was a really fun campaign. I think it's something that our advocates really enjoyed and still enjoy. But I mean, I think in 2015 and this last election cycle got almost every candidate on the record on all of our issues. So,
and I think one of the things, the reason I wanted to point this out is this previous slide, like you can use more than one tactic, right? You can use more than one thing at a time. So here we are doing an in-person engagement, asking a question, but we're also delivering petition signers from thousands of South Carolinians. How do you say that?
South Carolinians.
So, you can layer them on. So I was thinking Devin, I was thinking about you as a lobbyist. If you brought a student from the education department with you, for them to tell their story, then you're layering on the tactics. You're having more impact. So think about that as Katie goes through these different ways that you can influence elected officials. How can you do one, maybe then another, or combine them to have even more impact with your engagements?
Yep, thanks, Kimberly. So the first one that we're going to talk about is writing a letter and email. And with these, it's going to follow along in terms of what to say. It's going to follow your elevator pitch quite closely. So you'll notice you're going to have an ask in there. You want to keep it short and simple, make it personal. You want to include your address because you do want them to know that you are a constituent of theirs and that you are someone who is in their voting district. So that address is important. And then if it's someone, at a city level or state level that you can actually go to their office and hand deliver, which again, you can Google the address of where their office would be. You can hand deliver those to their office, or you can, send them in the mail. So that is the first way. Pretty simple there.
And Katie, I'll just say on that, I think we've heard from elected officials and from staff of elected officials that they pull out handwritten letters to their boss to share with them. So many each day that gets passed along, particularly the congressional level where they get a lot. So the more personal it is, the more it is about the story and why it's going to make a difference, can potentially help elevate that letter up to be seen, hopefully not just by staff, but directly by the elected official you're trying to reach.
Yep, and I have seen. I'm not sure, Justin, I know you said you're a social worker, if you work with kids at all, but we've had some really successful deliveries to elected officials' offices where we have children help us color on a banner or, draw pictures or tell us about, how they feel about the issue, and then delivering those to elected officials has been really fun. And we have definitely seen some of those hung up in their offices. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a fun way to get kids involved who normally don't have a voice in the political system to kind of get to say a little bit about, what their early education experience is like, or being able to have their voice reflected a little bit. So. All right, so our second action here is making a phone call, and I am just going to show you guys this video that's pretty quick on some tips on what to say and how to make a call. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this.
You don't have to read, watch, or click very far to see that politics is a messy business. But with increased political division has come increased awareness, passion, and engagement. Now more than ever, citizens are looking for ways to move the needle and have their voices heard. But how can you speak up? Calling your elected officials is an easy way to tell them how you feel about issues that impact kids. When you call your representative, someone who works in their office is usually standing by to answer your phone call. Sometimes, if you are calling a local or state official, you might get to speak to them directly. Offices keep a log of how many calls they receive for and against given issues, so your call is like your vote. Here are some tips on how to make your call count. State why you were calling and where you were from. it's important that they know they're talking to someone who votes. You don't have to be an issue expert. Just know your issue, know your position, and know what you want your elected official to do. If you're watching this video, chances are you're passionate about helping kids. That's a pretty good start. Like this video, these calls should take no more than 2 minutes. You will see how easy it is and how satisfying it is to have your voice heard. Remember, don't be nervous. Your elected officials work for you, and you can always practice until you feel comfortable. In fact, let's do that now. Here is a quick look at an advocate in Iowa calling their senator. Hello, this is the senator's office.
Hi, my name is Michelle and I live in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm calling to ask the senator to protect funding for Head Start. Now, Head Start helps give kids in Iowa and across the country a fair start. And as a mother of 2 young children, I have seen how very important it is for every child to be prepared for kindergarten on their first day.
Thank you. Can you please tell me your full name, address, and phone number?
Oh, of course. My name is Michelle Weiss, and I live in Des Moines, and my address is 1000 Main Street, and my phone number is 555-240-3624. And I would really love to hear back from the senator to find out how he plans to vote on Head Start funding.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll be sure to let the senator know.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pretty easy, right? Making calls is one of the quickest and most effective ways to make your voice heard. Now you try it.
All right, so there was our quick intro on making a phone call. The next tactic I have is writing a letter to the editor. So these are something that our advocates at SCAN really enjoy doing, and we get quite a few published every year. So a few tips for if you want to write a letter to the editor to get published in your local paper is it should be short. So these are only 150 to 200 words. So they're really just a couple paragraphs long. You also want to use those elevator pitch skills. So make it personal, get your story in there, make sure the ask is there. And then for most papers, you can actually submit these online now. So if you go, again, Google your local papers and look up letters to the editor, a lot of times there will just be a form that you can submit your letter to the editor, and then they'll let you know if they're going to publish it or not. And one of the things that makes these so powerful is that once it's published in the paper, we will often send these to the elected official's office as like an email saying, hey, just wondering if you saw this. And it's just an additional way to not only get the attention of an elected official, but also there are going to be other people in your community that see this and may be thinking about it as well. It's a way to raise awareness. So I'm gonna actually just stop sharing real quick and see, because I heard something, but I still can't see you when I don't have any like cues here if anyone wants to say anything. So I'm just going to take a pause and see if anyone has questions or so far, or if they have an experience where they've done one of these actions and want to share.
I just want to commend you on that. I mean, all of those ideas and options are fantastic. Before this job, I actually worked in Congress for 10 years. So I was on the receiving end on so many of those tactics that you mentioned. And you guys are just spot on in what you emphasize. And yeah, just, you know, I just wanted to laud your training because it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm going a little quicker than I normally would because this group, I think, is some of you are more experienced and some somewhere less, but oh yeah, Rosemary, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks. At the state level, things are a little bit different in that none of the state legislators have staff to answer the phone. Mm-hmm. That's good and that's bad. It means that if you call the number on the legislative website, you will get me. The bad thing about that is that during the course of the day, especially when we're in session, it is almost impossible to answer the phone. and to have a conversation with someone, because from the minute we start, we've got committee meetings and on the floor and so forth. And so the problem is that somebody may have an important topic to be discussed, but I'm not in a position to be able to take a actual phone call when I'm in a committee hearing or standing there on the floor and things like that. So hats off to Devin, who answered the phone, but I just wanted to tell you that the state level is a little bit different. And at least in Utah, it's very, very unusual to have a state legislator during a weekday be able to answer the phone. And it doesn't mean that they don't care about you or anything like that. It's just the logistics of that. Many times when those calls come in, I have to hit that, automatic messaging thing that says, I am so sorry, I can't talk with you at this moment. May I call you back? And so I just wanted to let you know that limit at the state level.
Yeah,
And-
thank you for sharing that. So if somebody wanted to, have their voice heard about an issue they cared about, what would be the best form? Like, what's the easiest form for you to digest and have time for at your office?
Either texts or emails. And at least with a text, I can, that's something that you can surreptitiously do during committee meetings and, quickly call back, whereas you just can't be sitting there in the middle of the conference chatting on the telephone with someone, especially about important things. So many times I will try to find a time that they would be able to talk. And people are reasonable if you say, I am so sorry, I have committee meetings until 6 p.m. Is there a time that I can talk to you later? Email, of course, could be read at all hours of the night and day. And that's often what happens, all hours of the night and day. So just that the voice calls are tough.
Yeah, great. Thank you for clarifying that. That's very helpful.
Can
And
I,
I think-
tag on
yeah.
with that? Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
So I interned up there last year at the legislature, and sometimes, because they can't answer the phone, like Representative Lester said, but they get interns, right? And so my representative would always message me if it was something important and tell me to call them back. And so I would do a lot of that talking. So you can go on the Utah State Legislature's website and find out what representative who's interning for them and contact that intern. Sometimes that helps as well when they're busy on session, but that's what me and Representative Ellison did.
And shout out, Stephanie is an amazing intern and was always at Representative Ellison's side and really mastered the process. So hooray for you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both for your input. And yeah, thank you for being on the call. It's fun to hear from someone on the other side who's been on the other side of that phone call or on the other side of the desk. So thank you. All right, so I'm going to go over my last one, which we talked a little bit about, but this is, let me share my screen again. This one is meeting your elected official at a public event. So a lot of elected officials will do, well, a lot of them have moved online during COVID. So some of them are hosting telephone town halls or online meetings that are public. But so you can look for those, but you in non-COVID times, they're usually out and about in public. So even congressional members will spend part of their time at home and will be out in the community. So they may be doing like a formal town hall. They may have coffee chats. I know in South Carolina, one of our representatives was always just hanging out front of grocery stores, talking to people, and you could look up his schedule and see which grocery store he'd be at. But those are good opportunities to just find out where they're going to be hosting a public event and getting to chat with them a little bit about the issue you care about there. So as I said earlier, we've done this very successfully over the last few years, and our goal is usually to get the candidate on record about the issue that we care about. And so our goal when we're going to these events is to get there early, try to get a good seat by the microphone, because a lot of times they'll only call for 1 to 3 questions. And so being that first one up at the mic can get you a better shot at actually getting your question in. But these, I think, energize people a lot because it's really fun to be able to be in an audience where you're seeing the elected officials speaking and getting to have that face-to-face engagement with them. So again, we did this a lot at presidential, during the presidential campaigns, but you can really do this with anyone. And it's not just for, elected officials aren't just out when they're campaigning, they also will be hosting these out in public for other times of the year as well. So the best way I have found, I think, to find these is to follow your elected officials on so their social media channels if they have them, and a lot of times they'll talk about going to be there. And I don't know, Kimberly, are there other ways that you found that have been successful in being able to find out where these are going to be held?
I mean, in some cases, the local newspapers do publish them as well, if they have community pages. But I do think social channels are the best way to get schedules because they post them on those channels to be able to notify their constituents. I'm looking at this picture and I'm laughing at it because this woman in the picture, Tiffany, is actually a Utah as well. I just realized that as we're sitting here. She graduated from a different university, and I will not mention that name. But she is our superstar bird dogger. She has met every presidential candidate in Iowa. And now we've moved her on to the Iowa congressional delegation, where she's gotten to know a lot of them. And she's just a rock star in terms of engaging both elected officials and candidates. And she's a Utah. So I just had to throw that out there.
Yep. And I just thought of another way too that I have found out what public events elected officials are going to be hosting is a lot of them have newsletters. So if you sign up for their newsletters through their websites, they will often send out emails letting you know if they have something coming up. So that's been a good way as well. And everyone does it differently. Like I know with Senator Graham, when I was in South Carolina, he would do telephone town halls, but you had to be signed up in advance in order to get the email or the text telling you when it was going to be, and they would arrive really quickly before they'd start. So you'd get an email like 6 that would say, we're hosting a town hall at 7 tonight. So you'd only have like an hour notice, and you'd only hear about it if you'd signed up for this list in advance. So I think just looking up your elected official that you want to be contacting and seeing what forms of communication they're using with their constituents, and then getting signed up for anything that you see on their site is helpful too.
And obviously a lot of these public in-person events have gone to virtual, and it's a similar tactic. And in a lot of cases, the chat box is used for questions, or you can submit questions in advance. So again, reading the instructions in advance of the event, particularly if it's a virtual event, to try to get your questions submitted.
Mm-hmm. And then we also always ask our advocates when they do have these interactions to then post it on social and, thank the person for their time. And it's a good way to kind of just spread the message and to get more people, seeing the response that they gave. If that was what your goal was to get the candidate on the record on an issue, you can include that in your post. But that's something that I actually didn't include in this presentation, but a lot of elected officials are active on social media. And so that's another way that you can contact them as well. So that wraps up my section on different tactics that you can take. Does anyone have any other questions or anything that they wanted to share on this piece before I move on to the next?
Any tips of the trade?
I mean, just to add, you mentioned that you could hand deliver the mail. Sometimes you got to use caution when you do that in Congress. Offices typically don't like that. Especially you got to make sure that it's unsealed. Mm-hmm. Otherwise they could actually just call the police on you. So yeah, used a little bit of caution there, but no, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, Devin, one of the things we've always tried to encourage is to use postcards versus envelopes. I lived through the anthrax scare here in DC, so that changed the whole postal system in Congress. So postcards are easier. And also if they know you're coming, it's also helpful.
Yes, so we typically, when we do these deliveries with our advocates, we typically do let the office know in advance that we're coming by to drop it off. And then a lot of times we'll have maybe a few volunteers go and do a drop off and take a photo. And even if it's not with the elected official, a lot of times they'll just take one outside the office to post on social. But we typically deliver, like Kimberly said, the postcards, or we'll also do petitions. So yeah, nothing in envelopes, just things that are out in the open.
No boxes.
Yep, no boxes. All right, well, I have just a kind of a fun video, because my next tip is that it's great if you can get involved, but if you can get others to take action with you, that's how a movement gets started. And so you can, make a phone call, but if you can get 5 friends to call too, you are starting to do that movement building. So I have just a quick kind of fun video about how to start a movement here.
So ladies and gentlemen, at TED, we talk a lot about leadership and how to make a movement. So let's watch a movement happen, start to finish, in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons from it. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand out and be ridiculed. But what he's doing is so easy to follow. So here's his first follower with a crucial role. He's going to show everyone else how to follow. Now notice that the leader embraces him as an equal. So now it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Now there he is calling to his friends. Now if you notice that the first follower is actually an underestimated form of leadership in itself. It takes guts to stand out like that. The first follower is what transforms a lone nut into a leader. And here comes a second follower. Now it's not a lone nut, it's not 2 nuts, 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. So a movement must be public. It's important to show not just the leader, but the followers, because you find that new followers emulate the followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, and immediately after, 3 more people. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point. Now we've got a movement. So notice that as more people join in, it's less risky. So those that were sitting on the fence before now have no reason not to. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, but they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. So over the next minute, you'll see all of the those that prefer to stick with the crowd, because eventually they would be ridiculed for not joining in. And that's how you make a movement. But let's recap some lessons from this. So first, if you are the type, like the shirtless dancing guy, that is standing alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals. So it's clearly about the movement, not you. Okay, but we might have missed the real lesson here. The biggest lesson, if you noticed, did you catch it? Is that leadership is over-glorified. That yes, it was the shirtless guy was first, and he'll get all the credit, but it was really the first follower that transformed the lone nut into a leader. So as we're told that we should all be leaders, that would be really ineffective. If you really care about starting a movement, have the courage to follow and show others how to follow. And when you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first one to stand up and join in. And what a perfect place to do that at TED. Thanks.
All right, so it's a bit of a silly example, but it's a fun one. So I just wanted to share that, and I'm going to now turn it over to Kimberly, who's going to give us a few case examples of campaigns that we have done at Save the Children Action Network, and then we'll be wrapping up. So Kimberly, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Katie. I wonder if I've ever been the lone nut, or have I been the first follower, or have I been the one running to try to join so that I don't look foolish? I'm going to reflect on that later and think in my mind what I've been. We thought in terms of kind of package this together. Again, this was an Advocacy 101 training to help provide you the skills to know how to contact and engage your elected officials on the issues that you care about. So how does this though then look like if you do build a movement or a campaign around a particular issue, what does that look like? So I'm going to give you 2 examples here of recent campaigns that we have done at work. And this is the first is around the Afghan refugee resettlement in the US. It's something that Save the Children has been working on. We are doing programs in Afghanistan, working with children. We are back doing those programs. It is not a safe place for our staff to be working, but they are there. They're Afghan nationals doing the work. So here, our advocacy priorities for this campaign was around safety and security, operational issues, and resettlement. So we needed to expedite and expand visas and other options to ensure passage out of the country for Afghans who may be at risk, including granting humanitarian parole. There were safety issues. There was, we had to address the impediments caused by the U.S. government and other international sanctions. We needed to continue to support leadership on funding to be able to help operationalize this. And then we had the resettlement issue. We had to work to provide families and unaccompanied children with the services and assistance they needed. Work to allocate government funding for NGOs so they could provide child-specific services and protection to Afghan refugees. So those were our needs and asks throughout the campaign. And that's a lot, right? So this shows you how our advocates then took action, how we broke that down where people could engage. So we first fundraised. Money is always an issue. We had advocates started teams to fundraise for the Save the Children Afghan Crisis Child Relief Fund. Great response across the country and the world to help provide funds for that. We had to advocate. We sent thousands of messages to President Biden urging him to protect Afghan children and their families. We served. We connected with local refugee service centers for volunteer opportunities to support Afghan families. So took what our needs and asks were and then moved them into how we could support. In the serve category, we actually went a step further that wasn't in here, but we actually help support and work at the resettlement camps in the US, providing child safe places. So places on those camps for mothers and children to come and be children. That is always the hardest thing about children who are displaced, whether it's from a hurricane or a crisis like the Afghanistan crisis, but children, to give them a space, a colorful space to be children. So we had volunteers. Actually, I met a Weber State graduate in New Mexico who was volunteering with Save the Children through LDS Charities, who was there volunteering, helping to provide that space for children to be safe. So really big picture, right, about how we ran that campaign. Another example around the American Rescue Plan. This, for those of you who don't know, was put forth after President Biden was elected to address the pandemic. And so there was a bill put forward that had all these great things in it that we wanted for the issues we care about around early childhood care, education, and care. The child care industry was in crisis before, the pandemic just obliterated it. So we needed to help support that. Other important programs that help children. Child nutrition was also a big issue, and child poverty. So these were the issues in the bill that we were working on. What did we do to do this? These are the outcomes bill, so we can skip through the next one, that one there. So what we did to support this bill is we mobilized our advocates across the country. They sent over 50,000 messages to Congress. We had more than 2,500 handwritten postcards delivered, mostly because of the pandemic. They were being delivered to district offices, which we haven't really discussed that tonight, but I do think on the congressional level, building those relationships with your district staff and knowing where they are, and you can deliver items like postcards to your district staff can have a great impact because they don't have as much a flood of information as the congressional offices do. So this is how our advocates engaged in the campaign, which resulted in those outcomes. The American Rescue Plan passed. Then our next step, which we don't show here, is then we work to make sure the implementation of that occurred. Working with the states, working with state legislators, working with governors, to help them build a plan, use the resources, and get them to the most critical places to support those. So sometimes you have a win, but then you have another campaign, and then you have to move on. So it can be a cyclical thing. It's not a one and done. That would be great. We'd have world peace and everything would be over, right? So we'd all just celebrate. So we want to just we want to first thank you for spending time with us tonight. I mean, I know that Katie and I do this for a living. This is our job. We get to work with people all over the country. I've always said I've been in DC for 28 years, but the only reason why I've survived is after a very short stint on Capitol Hill, I went into working with people outside of DC. So I have stayed sane and got outside the bubble. Get to see and work with people like you all here on the Zoom tonight. We'll give you a couple options if you want to keep in touch with us. If you want to engage in advocacy on the issues that we work on, you can learn more by visiting our website, SaveTheChildrenActionNetwork.org or SaveTheChildren.org as well. And you can follow us on social media, where you can also sign up for our emails and start your advocacy work by click and sending, as we call it. The easiest entry point is to join an organization that you believe in and that supports the issues you care about, and start with email communications. And then you'll just grow from there into doing letters to the editor, to doing in-person meetings. Then for running for office after that, you'll just keep moving up the ladder of engagement. Justin, we're going to check back in on you in a couple of years and see how you're doing after you graduate with your social work degree, and see what kind of advocate you've become. So thank you all for joining tonight. Katie and I are happy to answer any questions, and also happy to follow up with anybody if there's questions afterwards.
And I just want to emphasize, Kimberly, what you said about if you are a beginner, getting in touch with an organization who is doing the advocacy side of what you're passionate about. So that may be an organization on the state level or the federal level or a local level, but they can really help you, because we've got this whole team in DC that's putting together the policies and doing, like, I think those campaigns, just looking at them feels overwhelming. And as an individual, it would be completely overwhelming to figure out how to loop into that. But because we have policy experts who help us put those campaigns together, it makes it really easy for our advocates to loop in, because we just send them emails saying, hey, here's what we need from you. And we give them the training skills along the way to help kind of level up those advocacy skills so that they feel more and more comfortable over time. But getting in touch with an organization that is doing the work on the issues that you care about, that can help you kind of build those skills and stay connected, is a really good place to start.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and just thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Katie, for all the time you put into this and for taking the time with us tonight. I know that we didn't have the turnout that we would have liked, but we did record this. And so hopefully we get some viewers, from our YouTube channel and social media, things like that. I'm sure we will. So this will live on and continue to hopefully teach people how to engage better. Because so many people, like you mentioned, they have the drive and desire, but they just don't know where to start. And this gave them so many fantastic pointers. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Devin. I'm just going to add one final plug for if you do watch this, or for Stefan and Justin on this call tonight. If you watch this and want to become an advocate, one of the great things you can do at Weber State is to do an internship at the Walker Institute, whether at the state or national level. Come visit me in DC. Come on, get an internship. It's a great thing to do. So that is just a great pathway to finding your voice, is through an internship. I did that when I was at Weber State here in Washington, DC, and it fundamentally changed my life. So anybody watching later or now, I encourage you to visit the Walker Institute and find an internship for yourself.
I second that motion. No. For real, I'm going to run for office in 2 years after being up there. I can't stand not being up there this year. So I'm working towards doing what I need to get my ducks in a row for to run for House in 2 years.
Great. There you go.
I love that. Thank you for that endorsement and that plug. I'll pay you later. No, we're always trying to get more interns. So yeah, please contact us at the Walker Institute. But no, thank you so much for your time and effort here. I hope to meet you in person next time.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Evan, did he sign off already? Leah. Can we share this with the Presidential Leadership Fellows?
Oh my gosh, of course. So it's recording right now. And then what it's going to do is dump into my video management, or maybe even Becky's video management. And what we will do is get it connect like onto our YouTube, but we'll share with you the link so you can just watch it and share.
Yeah, that would be good, because I think for March's meeting, I could show it.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.